They erased my credit while I sat at the kitchen table, fingers curled around a mug I did not remember pouring. The bank app on my phone showed a clean, white screen where my score should be. It read, "Account removed." I stared until the words jittered. My heart slammed. I pulled up my full profile and every number that had followed me since 18 was gone. History, balance, identity points, gone. A recorded voice on a follow-up call told me something about consolidation authorization and an agent number that led to deadlines. My landlord texted, "No payment, no keys." My mom left a voice note I'd barely heard. "Camila, are you okay?" I wasn't. I logged into my work portal and found my payroll flagged. My boss replied with a bland message, "We're sorting delays." My hands trembled. I thought of the people who could erase someone. Banks, big data firms, some invisible committee. I felt small and furious, like a ghost kicked out from real life. I promised myself then, between a sob and a plan, that if they erased my credit, I would erase their quiet power over me. At first I tried to reason. I called every number, sent emails, filled forms. Each response was a circle of polite lies. A bank rep asked my mother's maiden name. They already knew it. An automated reply said security review and gave me a reference code that vanished when I asked for a supervisor. My employer's HR said payroll was under review and to expect delays. My messages piled up, warnings about bills, threats about utilities. I felt like a leaking boat. Each reply another peg in the hull. Alone in my small apartment, I printed the little proofs I could find, screenshots, timestamps, the dead confirmation page that had my name and the words "account removed." I taped them to the fridge like flags. At night I replayed the moment, the blank number where my credit had lived and the quiet, suffocating certainty that this was not random. Someone had the power to make me invisible. That thought did not sit as fear, it burned. I started looking for patterns, for names attached to the authorization code. An obscure firm name flickered briefly on one email header. It could be a clue. It had to be. The firm name led me down rabbit holes. It was registered in a state I had never visited, under a holding company with 3-letter initials I didn't recognize. Their site was a corporate blur, sleek fonts, empty mission statements. I dug into public filings by night and clicked through archive pages. An old forum post from 2 years ago mentioned a data scrub pilot tested quietly with creditors. The pilot's contact was a woman I had never heard of, but her LinkedIn listed a council seat on something called Consumer Data Integrity. I felt the first shock of taste. This wasn't a small-time fraud. This was legal dust. At work, my manager asked if I could cover a night shift. I said yes, because I needed any money I could get. My bank calls multiplied. The more I pressed, the more closed the doors became. My inbox is filled with canned apologies and policy PDFs. I started to walk routes through towns I had never taken, watching bank branches and data centers with a new kind of attention. I scribbled a map on scrap paper. I could feel the world rearranging around a hole with my name painted on it. I found a single physical clue, an envelope in my mailbox with no return address and a thin card inside. It read, "We make space." No signature. I slammed it onto the table and traced the raised print. The line was printed with a type of ink used by printing houses that serve boutique consultancies. That knowledge came from a short-lived internship I had years ago, tiny details like that stuck in corners of my brain. I called an old friend from the internship, Matteo, who now ran a small print shop. He listened, then said quietly, "You don't chase this alone." I shut my mouth, not trusting how raw I sounded. He met me at dusk with a battered laptop and a packet of leads. We worked until the moon was pale, following IPs, trace routes, and shell companies. A pattern repeated, names and accounts traced back to a handful of financial firms and a single address in a neighboring city. It was a strip of anonymous offices, too new to have tenants. We drove there in Matteo's rusted hatchback and saw cameras and a sign with those same 3-letter initials. A man on the second floor watched us through blinds. He did not wave. I told Matteo my plan aloud and felt the plan getting sharper. We would get in, find records, and prove who had my credit. Matteo hesitated. "It's illegal to break in," he said. "We'll get caught." I nodded. He offered something else, social engineering. He remembered that firms sometimes used temp workers and contractors. A janitor, a courier, Anyone with a key could be asked for a favor. With a fake badge, a confident walk, and a story about a network outage, we could gain access. I felt a thrill at the thought, like standing at the lip of a cliff with a parachute untested. We staged rehearsals in my living room, practiced tones, and wrote scripts. I found a courier uniform online and altered it. My heart hammered when we pulled into that strip of offices the next morning. Mateo's hands were steady on the wheel. I felt raw rage sharpen into calm focus. If they had erased my life to a number, I was going to slide into their building and take back a single file. Evidence. Proof. Or at least the truth. We moved slowly and watched shift changes, noting morning faces and delivery windows. At 11, a courier left, badge swinging. We slipped into his slot, vogued into a lobby with a fake delivery manifest, and a gadget Mateo rigged to clone the building's temporary access codes. Security barely blinked. Inside, the air smelled like electronics and cheap coffee. Teams of desks sat in neat rows with employees staring at screens that were mostly black. We split and moved like shadows. My palms were clammy, but my voice stayed, even as I told a receptionist we had an urgent firmware package. She barely looked up. Mateo worked on a service door while I took the elevator to the third floor, pure instinct pulling me. There, an unlocked office with folders marked with names. I found a cluster of files with people erased in the past 2 years. My breath hitched when I saw the entries. Data cleanse and credit null. My own name was on a spreadsheet with a timestamp and a person's initials, LC. My throat closed. I copied files to a thumb drive with hands I refused to shake. We left like ghosts. The files were a map of maneuvers. They showed contracts with banks, authorization codes, and legal-sounding memos about consumer hygiene. Each line blurred the difference between voluntary consent and corporate coercion. The spreadsheet listed dozens of names, real people whose credit histories had been scrubbed, some not even knowing it. There were dates, signatures, and a recurring contract clause that allowed the firm to erase credit in exchange for risk mitigation credits paid by lenders. Income smoothing, they called it. The same initials appeared again, LC. I searched the files for a full name and found it on a letterhead, Lucien Calloway, Director of Regulatory Affairs. I Googled him and found op-eds praising him for modernizing finance. There were photos of him smiling in glossy magazines. I felt sick. This man had a public face that smiled and a private machine that could wipe people. I realized then the stakes were not personal revenge alone. It was exposing a system that punished people while protecting winners. I wanted to scream, but I held a scream like a held breath, steady and ready. We needed leverage. Exposing the files anonymously might work, but could vanish like a rumor. I called a journalist I half-trusted from a campus paper, Aiden, who had gone rabid for truth. He met me in a diner and picked at a sandwich while I slid him the thumb drive. He listened, then looked at me with a kind of hunger. "This could be a storm," he said, "but they'll bury you." I asked if he would run with it. He hesitated, mapping legal risk with narrow eyes, then said he needed corroboration, contacts, and more files. He wanted names from individuals affected to build a pattern. I thought of the people on the spreadsheet and felt both exposed and an ember of hope. We planned to contact victims, gather testimony, and time a release during a hearing Lucien would attend. We had to be careful. The firm had lawyers. The plan felt fragile like paper wings, but it was the only way to make light blast through social media and law offices alike. I began contacting people on the list with a steady voice and a careful script. Some slammed doors in my face or asked for money. Others cried and told me stories of missed rent and job denials because a number had disappeared. An old woman named Rosa said her mortgage vanished and a bank repossessed without notice. A student named Kian could not get a loan to finish school. With each call, my anger turned into a focused sorrow. Mateo sat with me as I cataloged testimonies, typed them into neat files, and matched them with the timestamps. A pattern formed. The firm's erasures targeted people at hard times, those who could least fight back. People who needed credit, most were easiest to remove. Aiden collected the strongest stories and promised to build a narrative. We agreed to leak in stages. First the human face, then the contracts. We watched the calendar for Lucien's speech at a consumer conference. It was a week away. I practiced staying calm and ready for what would come after the storm. The night before the speech, An anonymous email arrived with a single line. Stop. The message had no signature, but the IP matched one of the firm's proxies. My chest tightened. Someone knew. Maybe Lucien knew. Maybe they had security watching. Mateo argued to back out. We can leak later, he said. I looked at all the names on the list, the faces that depended on exposure for justice. I couldn't. We pressed on. Aiden prepared a preface with a clear summary and posted a batch of stories and files to a secure server. We sent an encrypted tip to a small but respected national outlet and scheduled an embargo break to coincide with Lucien's speech. I couldn't sleep. I imagined Lucien at a podium about to be interrupted by a slow-rolling disclosure. Dawn broke like a warning siren. We drove to the conference with hands knotted around the steering wheel and the thumb drive burning in my pocket. Lucien was as charming in person as in his photos. White hair, measured smile, a voice practiced in comfort. The crowd was polite and hungry for his assurances that finance could be safer. Halfway through his speech, a notification pinged his assistant's phone. The assistant's expression folded, murmurs rippled. Screens in the hall flickered as a story link spread through journalists. Aiden texted me, now. My mouth went dry. Lucien's face did not betray him. He finished a sentence and turned the microphone over to questions. The first reporter asked about a leak. Lucien smiled and denied everything. Then my phone buzzed again, a live feed of the files. Someone from the audience stood and asked a direct question about consumer erase agreements. The crowd shifted. Lucien's smile thinned. Cameras swarmed. Reporters shouted. It felt like standing inside a crack of light. The firm issued a statement calling the files mischaracterized. Lucien said he would cooperate with inquiries. I felt both triumph and an icy warning they could still spin this. The firm moved fast. Within hours, legal threats arrived in our inboxes. The bank sent a cease and desist to Aiden's outlet. Mateo's print shop faced an unexpected audit. They were slicing outward, trying to close the leaks. Lucien held a press conference with rehearsed humility, promising independent review. My phone began to light up with threats and offers. Someone called offering hush money. Another number warned me to stop or face legal consequences. I felt watched. My apartment door had a scratch I didn't remember. I began to notice headlights outside at odd hours. The campaign to discredit the files began. Claims of fabricated evidence, hacked systems, and misinterpretations. Aiden fought back with careful, vetted evidence. The public began to bubble with outrage and confusion. For every person who believed, another smirked and said, "Show proof." I had the proof. I also had the weight of knowing exposure could cost people their safety. We had begun a war where they had more armor. Then a twist I didn't expect. A whistleblower contacted us, not through email but through a thick envelope left at my building's community board. The notes inside were raw, internal emails and recorded voicemails implicating a middle manager named LP who had argued privately against erasing certain accounts. The manager's message suggested discomfort and a hint of fear. The whistleblower wrote that LP had been forced to sign a non-disclosure that felt like a gag. LP's initials matched a recurring sign-off in several internal memos. I felt a surge of hope so bright it frightened me. If LP would talk, we could get inside stories of meetings, pressures, and perhaps the direct order chain. Aiden planned a careful approach. We would offer protection and anonymity. We met in the back of a coffee shop and waited with coffee cooling into disappointment. Hours later, a woman slipped into the booth, eyes darting, and said, "I want to help." Her voice trembled as she unfolded the truth. LP, Lena Park, was softer and braver than I expected. She spoke in short bursts, like someone used to being interrupted. She described board meetings where executives compared consumer files to inventory, where they used terms like clearing obsolete entries. She told us about incentives. Banks paid the firm to remove risky clients, and the firm earned bonuses. She gave us a folder of meeting minutes and a recording of a conference call where Lucien joked about clean numbers. Listening to her, I felt rage and relief braided together. LP feared retaliation. She had lost sleep and a promotion when she questioned the practice. We offered legal counsel through Aiden's contacts and hid her identity in every public record. She became our key to the inner room. With her cooperation, we could show intent, not just action. But months of fear are heavy, and LP asked about safety for her family. I promised to protect them. I felt an old, fierce certainty. The truth deserved to land where it would hurt them most. Their wallets, their reputations, and their power. The next stage was surgical. We released the human stories first, then the contracts, then the internal memos and recordings that proved intent. Each wave crashed harder than the last. Social media boiled. Advocacy groups demanded investigations. The national outlet ran an exposé with our files and interviews. Bank customers crowded phone lines. Lucian denied intent and emphasized compliance. Regulators opened inquiries. The firm tried to spin using legal teams and PR flacks, but the recording of Lucian's laugh on that conference call became a seed journalists played on repeat. Stock price wobbled and then fell. I watched the numbers with an odd mix of detachment and hunger. Mateo got threats at his shop. Aiden's email received subpoenas. LP stayed hidden. But with every document published, more victims came forward. People who had suffered lost jobs or homes told their stories live on camera. The public's voice turned from curiosity to fury. A new twist arrived in the middle of that uproar. An unexpected ally from inside one of the major banks called me. Her name was Priya, a compliance officer who had seen the contracts and objected. Priya said she feared for her career but couldn't live with silence. She confirmed that some banks had quietly paid for cleanses to stabilize books after risky lending. She provided payment records, tying bank executives to the firm. Her testimony put the problem higher up the ladder. With Priya's proof, regulators could not ignore the trail. I felt the world narrow into focus, names and dates linked like a chain. We ensured Priya's identity remained protected even as her evidence did most of the talking. The waves of consequence spread. Congressional inquiries, class action suits, and a resignation at a bank that tried to distance itself. The firm issued a rare public apology. It felt like a victory, but I couldn't shake the thought that power often slips away in clever ways. Even as the firm crumbled publicly, they fought back with a different weapon, algorithmic retaliation. My credit profile, which had been erased, reappeared but corrupted. New numbers glitched. Loan applications returned with errors. Accounts associated with victims got automatically flagged for inconsistency. Banks froze transfers. It was subtle and redoubtable. A machine could deny you without a face ever showing. I started losing contract offers, and small merchants declined my card. My phone fizzed with messages of failed verifications. We realized they had pushed code patches that targeted identifiers tied to whistleblower files. It was a fresh, invisible assault. I felt bruised by systems more than by people. We needed tech help. Mateo's cousin, a software engineer named Noor, joined and traced the flags to a middleware provider the firm used. It became clear that the fight was not over in courtrooms alone. We had to break the chain at the code level, make their machines stop punishing the very people they had erased. Noor wrote scripts, probed middleware, and found a routing rule that tagged profiles with certain hashes linked to erased accounts. If we could feed corrected hashes into data streams, we could bypass the flags. It felt a little like learning a new language to fight back. We built a patch to translate corrupted identifiers into clean ones. It was risky. Tampering with banking data systems is illegal and could land us in deep trouble. But we were careful, testing first on test accounts and donating to secure accounts run by advocacy groups. Slowly, our patch started to roll. People who had been denied at ATMs could withdraw. Loan applications began to move forward again. The sense of victory was immediate and humane. Calls from victims who could finally pay rent, enroll in school, or start a small business. I felt used to living in adrenaline, but the relief in those voices quieted a lot of the fury into purpose. We were fixing the harm in real time, not just publicizing it. But their lawyers found a clever counter. They sued our small group for unauthorized access and data tampering, naming Mateo, Noor, Aiden's outlet, and me. The filings threatened heavy fines and criminal charges. It felt like the machine pivoted to criminalize our rescue. We had done something illegal to fix an illegal act. It hurt. The moral line blurred into a jagged knife. We sought pro bono attorneys who specialized in whistleblower and civil rights law. They argued that our actions were in the public interest, but the courtroom could be cold and slow. Meanwhile, PR teams painted us as vigilantes. I had to live with a constant ache. We were both rescuers and criminals in the eyes of the law. People sent both love and hate through my inbox. I slept in short bursts. The judge set a preliminary hearing, and the world watched. I braced for a legal fight that could decide if people could take back their data by force when corporations refused to act. During the court wait, an unexpected personal attack surfaced. Someone leaked my address and my past on social media, twisting small mistakes I had made into character assaults. Old friends wrote me off. My landlord used the chaos as a reason to demand immediate eviction. It felt like the fight had seeped into every corner of my life. Lena Park called and told me she found a new email with malicious allegations. We faced climate after climate of small cruelties. In the lowest moments I thought of quitting, letting them bury the files and slide their machines back into place. But voices from the people we helped kept me upright. A woman named Rosa told me, "Because of you I have a roof." Those small human anchors were stronger than threats. Mateo made stew and jokes to get me to eat. Nur wrote code that hummed like a lullaby inside my head. We prepared legal briefs and testimonies. The hearing began in a narrow, gray courtroom with cameras outside and reporters in the hall. The hearing was a tense small war. Lucian and his team arrived with polished lawyers and a file of counterclaims. They painted us as saboteurs who endangered the security of financial systems. Our lawyers responded with documentation of intent, the contracts, the recordings, and Priya's bank payment proof. LP's testimony about being forced to sign away complaints landed in a courtroom that could not ignore a pattern. The judge listened with a face that refused easy judgment. At the hearing's climax, Aiden played an audio clip of Lucian's conference call in the courtroom. The room absorbed the laughter as evidence. The judge paused, then ordered a temporary injunction against the firm to halt further erasures. It felt like a door opening. Outside, crowds clapped, cameras flashed, and hashtags trended. Still, the injunction was not a full victory, just a stopgap. The legal fight would last months. But for now, their machine had a pause sign and people could breathe. Relief came with new problems. The firm filed chapter protections, and then offered settlements to several banks, essentially paying fines and keeping the core team intact. They tried to restructure away from culpability. Lucian announced he would step down while a new leadership handled reforms. It felt like a small victory wrapped in a softer lie. We had exposed them, they had paid a price, but power was like water, always finding a path. Yet more wins appeared. New regulations were proposed, banks launched internal reviews, and some executives resigned. Legislators began hearings to tighten data protections. The small community of people we helped started a cooperative to monitor credit records and offer free repair services. I slept better than before, but the knowledge that the fight would return like a tide kept me aware. I took a morning run and let the city breathe in my lungs. The sun felt honest that day. Then, in a move that shocked public and private alike, an internal audit found a pattern of financial routing that led to an offshore account linked to Lucian's firm and to a shell company owned by several bank executives. The press exploded. Regulators widened inquiries into money laundering and collusion. Lucian's defense crumbled as more proof tied senior bank officials to payments that incentivized erasing people to keep profits clean. Stock markets reacted. Lucian's resignation became a corporate scandal. People who had been skeptical now demanded prosecutions. I felt a strange emptiness mixed with vindication, like a cold sweetness in the air after rain. The system cracked in places big enough for sunlight to seep in. Our small group gained national recognition, but that did not make the nights easier. I still woke to the fear of retaliation, but I also woke to emails from people thanking us for changing their lives. That tension, fear braided with gratitude, became my new normal. Legal processes dragged on, but settlements and prosecutions were on the horizon. The firm was stripped of contracts, and faces once untouchable were shoved into courtrooms. We were called to testify for hearings and to advise on regulatory reforms. The cooperative we started blossomed into a nonprofit that trained people to protect their financial identity. Mateo's print shop received donations in business, Nor's coding group grew into a small security firm, and Aiden received a journalism prize. I found an odd calm in the chaos, my life stitched with new purpose. I spoke at community centers about small steps to protect credit and about standing up when systems fail. I felt my story was no longer only mine. It connected to thousands who needed guardrails against invisible erasures. Lucien's trial approached, and with it the real test. Would justice be more than headlines? On the day of Lucien's final hearing, I sat in the gallery and felt the years tighten in my chest. Evidence, testimonies, and the mountain of victims' names stacked like a book against him. Priya's account and Lena Park's minutes were read aloud. The judge's verdict came after long deliberation. Guilty on multiple counts, conspiracy, falsifying records, and facilitating financial harm. Sentencing followed soon after. The firm was fined heavily, executives barred from industry roles, and many banks agreed to restitution for victims. It was not perfect. Not everyone reclaimed what they lost, and the law could punish but not always heal. Still, I felt the world was a little right. My credit was restored, not with fanfare but with a quiet email and a number that matched my name. I stood outside the courthouse afterward with Mateo and Noor, sunlight on our faces. People we had helped hugged us. I thought of the empty screen the morning they erased me and how that absence had become a fulcrum. I had moved through fear, fury, and careful cunning to bend a machine that thought itself invincible. The victory was firm, not cruel, meant to protect, not punish. I learned that erasure can be fought by making faces and names stick in the world until justice finds them. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to my YouTube channel and tap the bell to get notified the moment we drop a new story, and don't forget to like the video to help others find it.